Hello, YouTubers, friends, compatriots, bootlickers, shills, death slicers, peasants, vassals, minions, meat sacks. I'm Useful Idiot. Welcome. And today I want to go to Brazil. And this is a big story, and it's been going on for a while. But I've had a little trouble sorting it out because one narrative, of course, is the narrative of the poor in the country who support the government that's in power now and view it as a takedown and an undermining of democracy. And then we have the middle class who and the elites who support this impeachment and all this kind of craziness that's going on down in Brazil right now. And boy, what a wealth of material I sorted through to figure out exactly what's going on there, and it's still hard to tell. First of all, let me give you a little background on Brazil and why this is important. And I guess the main reason, of course, it's the seventh largest GDP in the world. So we're talking about a relative economic powerhouse. Only these days, they're not an economic powerhouse because they've had a recession that's been going on for years, a very severe one. And there was a stock market crash last year in 2015. Their GDP contracted near 4% in 2015 and is said to contract another 3% in 2016. And so if something like that, of course, happened in the United States, it would be considered a pretty dramatic event. And we've had bailouts and we've had currency wars going on. And all this after previously the economy had been chugging right along around 2010. 7.5% growth was the average per year. And now we have industrial and mining sectors in contraction. And like I say, they're having not only the worst recession they've had in a while, but the worst recession they've had in 100 years, 1901. And of course, one of the main impetus for this downturn has been the China slowdown. China exports are down 60% year over year, and also Brazil has a very high inflation rate. They always have 14.25%, or an inflation rate of 11%. And the banks have some wiggle room, though. They have a high interest rate there, 14.25%, and reported unemployment of 7.6%. But of course, that'd be hard to calculate, and we can assume that it's probably double that. So let's say 15%. So consumption, investment, credit, all down, and then of course the tax base shrinks, and then it feeds into all these other problems. We've seen this in a lot of other countries as well. So we see that here. And to get back to the scandal at the heart of this, so what we have is this impeachment happening, and the present president, Rousseff, came into power in 2014 and is now somewhat implicated in this scandal that's going on involving kickbacks, construction contracts, and the largest state-owned oil company in Brazil. And it got a little even more complicated when the present president, Rousseff, tried to offer the previous president, who had all the economic success, a minister position in order to protect him from prosecution. And so all this drama was unleashed when all this was happening, and 3.6 million people took to the streets. So quite a show. It would be rare to see something like that in the United States, for example. So what we have is ex-President Lula is at the center of this as well. Is implicated in this kickback bribery scandal, and he was president from 2003 to 2010, and this involved $1.1 million in kickbacks and a total $5.3 billion scandal. So pretty huge, and basically construction contracts were inflated. There was these kickbacks and bribes, and it was all connected to Petrobras, the state-owned oil company. And at the time, Rousseff, the current president of Brazil, ran that company. So and then since then, Lula's been arrested. The previous president, dozens of other people arrested, and talk about perhaps even $200 billion embezzled. And so what a incredible situation, and the number of people implicated in this scandal is huge too. And the vice president, who's supposed to take over for Rousseff, has now, has always been implicated in the same scandal, and also it has a vice president of Goldman Sachs as part of his economic team, Goldman Sachs in Brazil. So there's all these connections and all these potentialities about what is really unfolding there because of the scope of this. I think something along the lines of 2/3, 594 Congress members in Brazil, and 318 are under investigation or face charges. So everybody involved seems to be involved in this corruption. And not only that, the opposition leader who backs this impeachment, who's also part of the scandal, he's part of the opposition. So there's crosses all party lines, and just an amazing level of corruption. But I say that it's only a major level of corruption because we've discovered it. I'm sure the United States could put Brazil to shame if all the dirty laundry was ever let out for everyone to see. But let's get into a little more background. Brazil, they were a CIA-installed puppet government from 1964 to 1985. And this isn't a conspiracy theory. It's documented, and the CIA's come out and admitted that they took down the government in 1964. And the country only had independence since about 1950. Before that, they were a monarchy, but still associated with Portugal. And but anyway, from 1964 to 1985, they had a right-wing dictatorship that set new standards for corruption. Of course, the U.S. supported it because it was a CIA puppet government. And in fact, I guess U.S. and U.K. agents went down there and taught the Brazilian government how to torture people. So back in the 60s and swinging 60s and the swinging 70s and 80s, when torture really wasn't a controversial issue. And then you have all these companies that are partially state-owned, and that's why we have this large company, Petrobras, which is the giant oil company at the center of this, and we shouldn't be surprised there. And of course, Brazil's a giant social welfare state with universal health care and lots of social security. And they have some of the worst income disparity in the world, and that's one of the things that's noted about Brazil, and everybody seems to know that the rich are very, very rich and the poor are very, very, very poor. And one reason is because the same four families control all the media there, and the same families have 208 years of control. European elites that have been there since 1808 still have the family lineage that controls Brazil. And then they have some movers and shakers there as well. There's a guy named Jorge Paula Lehmann who is worth $20 billion and gets all his money from Heinz Ketchup, Burger King, and Anheuser-Busch. He's a huge owner and part owner of all those companies. And he's a mover and shaker in this, and he's facilitating this impeachment of Rousseff that's going on right now. And it's just kind of funny that all the people who are pressing for the impeachment are all neck deep in the same corruption, the same fraud, and are all indicted and possibly going to be convicted. And so one of the big things about this, of course, is the undermining of the BRICS narrative. The BRICS countries having this rising to power, and they're going to displace the United States economic power, and they were going to replace the world reserve currency with their currencies. And so once again, we see that these are paper dragons, and Brazil is a good example of that, on the ropes now economically. And the future could hold IMF intervention, could hold a lot of austerity because of their generous welfare systems. And then we're going to have Western companies gaining access to massive Brazilian oil reserves, and that's probably what's at the heart of this, because we also have NGOs operating in Brazil, notably the Students for Liberty, that are financed by the Koch brothers. And so there is a certain amount of U.S. involvement, and if I dig up any more U.S. involvement, of course I'll do another video. But in the meantime, I just wanted to point out kind of what's going on there now, and why the situation in Brazil is important, why it's dramatic, why it's historic, um, and trying to simplify it a little bit because there's so many things going on. I'll attach a bunch of material below that's even more complicated than the story that I've tried to simplify here. But there, look at that, Brazil. Brazil is not only having a crisis in the real world, they're practically turning into the movie. I'm a useful idiot. Don't you be one too.